You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 3rd of April 2025 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's programme, Israel's Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu is in Hungary, which used the opportunity to exit the International Criminal Court. After that, we'll check in on Australia's elections and how Donald Trump's tariff announcement will impact the race. From there to the latest from Watches and Wonders in Geneva. We'll also check in with the world's oldest design fair in Paris. And finally, it is Thursday and the global countdown. Fernando Augusto Pacheco, where in the world are you greeting me from today?
Bună ziua, Chris. Today on the global countdown, it's all about Romanian pop.
Mulțumesc, Fernando, mulțumesc. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is a wanted man internationally, but among the allies who will not abide by an international criminal court warrant for his arrest is Hungary. Netanyahu's visit to Hungary also coincides with Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government earlier today announcing that it will withdraw from the ICC, which it has accused of being politically motivated. Well, Gorana Grgić is Monocle's security correspondent and joins me now. Gorana, good to have you back on the show. Viktor Orban invited Netanyahu basically a day after the ICC issued its arrest warrant for him. Do these two leaders see each other as sort of peas in a pod allies at this point?
That's absolutely right, Chris. So Viktor Orban made it clear from the outset when the arrest warrant was issued back in November of last year that he would disregard this ruling in a sense. And he indeed sees Netanyahu as an ally. These two leaders share a deep skepticism of international institutions and have positioned themselves as champions of what we might term as illiberal democracy, something that Viktor Orban has been sort of the main cheerleader for, if I can put it that way. Both are also very much aligned with Donald Trump, who recently imposed sanctions on the ICC over its Israel investigation. And for Orban, ultimately, who has for a long time now challenged EU's rules and norms, this is an opportunity to reaffirm Hungary's break from Brussels on foreign policy.
Can you expand on that last part, Gorana? Because Hungary, as you suggest there, is still a member of the European Union. How is the EU, how is Brussels responding to this? Will they be hoping that Viktor Orban sends any messages to Netanyahu, or is that simply not possible at this point?
Yeah, I don't think we can count on Viktor Orban being necessarily the kind of messages for what European Union would like to see, at least on that declaratory level when it comes to Israeli politics. But to kind of step back and to focus on the issue at hand, and that's obviously the ICC, the stance towards ICC of the European Union as a whole, we have to underline that, of course, European Union, given the nature of its organization, right, cannot be a member of the ICC, but it is obviously one of its most steadfast supporters, and all 27 EU member states until now have been parties to the Rome Statute. So this will change with Hungary's decision now to withdraw from the ICC. But we also have to remember that European Union also offers quite a lot of political, financial and technical backing, given that, of course, the court is housed in the Netherlands. Now, on the kind of divisions that we see in the European Union, there are differences of opinion on this particular ICC warrant, where, for instance, countries such as Spain or the Netherlands and Finland have committed to enforcing the warrants, which would then include even arresting Benjamin Netanyahu. But on the other hand, Poland and Germany have really tried exploring how they would potentially host Netanyahu in various sort of capacities without triggering these legal consequences, which are obviously, if you are a signatory, then you should enforce these warrants, such as the one here when it comes to Israeli leadership.
Gorana, as you allude to there, the ICC's decision on Netanyahu has, whether countries are going to leave the ICC or not, as Hungary has now done, it was a controversial decision. It is being debated in Europe and among European countries as well, Germany and Poland, as you mentioned there in particular. How would you assess the ICC's reputation at this point? Because at the end of the day, it is an institution that has to rely on member states around the world, countries around the world, to enforce whatever it decides.
You're absolutely right. I would say that any kind of defiance to these types of warrants or rulings even undermine the global accountability for war crimes. And they also set a quite dangerous precedent when it comes to politics basically taking precedence over legal obligations. And so with each such move, like the one now that Hungary has taken, obviously the credibility of the court itself, of the ICC, right, is undermined. And it goes back to the bigger debate and conversation that we've had now for a good part of the past decade and even longer about the kind of decline of the rules-based order, about the decline of some of these institutions that were born out of the desire of the international community kind of on the whole, right? Because ICC has quite a number of signatories around the world. It's not just, exclusive to European Union or just the kind of global West, that, of course, with each such move that goes towards undermining its legitimacy and authority, we are one step, again, away from the kind of international community being ruled by rules and norms, and more so by power and politics, in fact, when it comes to this particular decision here.
Gorana Grgić, Monocle's security correspondent, thank you very much for joining us. Now here's Carlotta Rebello with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. Global markets pulled back sharply today as US President Donald Trump continued to unveil international tariffs. The S&P 500 futures dropped 3%, with Wall Street expecting losses today. International aid bodies are warning extreme heat and rainfall in Myanmar could cause disease outbreaks. This comes as rescue efforts continue in the country following an earthquake that has killed at least 3,000 people. And the US has won its bid to host the 2031 Women's World Cup, which will see the tournament expand to 48 teams. FIFA President Gianni Infantino also announced the UK is likely to clinch hosting the 2035 edition. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Carlotta. Australia's elections are now just 1 month away after the country's Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, last week announced a date of May 3rd for the nationwide contest. Opinion polls show a neck-and-neck race between Albanese's Labour Party and Peter Dutton's Liberal National Coalition. Among the topics likely to dominate Australian politics and every country's politics in the coming weeks is Donald Trump's global tariff announcement last night. Despite a free trade agreement, Australia was not spared a 10% across-the-board tax on its goods exported to the United States. Well, I'm joined now by Monocle's Canberra correspondent, Aarti Betigeri. Aarti, thanks very much for coming on the show. There has only been a week of campaigning so far, or just a bit less than that, but take us through the current state of the election so far. What have we learned?
Thanks, Chris. Well, it's as you say, we've got an election coming up in March on May 3rd. We were expecting it to be announced a little bit earlier, but there was a very inopportune cyclone a few weeks ago in Queensland that actually never eventuated, but that had the that had the impact of pushing the election date back by a few weeks. Now, as you say, we've got a race between primarily the incumbent Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. Now, he is the leader of the Labor Party, or the ALP, or just simply Labor. Now, that's centre-left. It's a party that was essentially born out of the union movement and still has very close ties with the union movement. Anthony Albanese himself, he's he's a career politician. He's from Sydney. He's most identifiable as someone who has really proclaimed his allegiance to the working class. You know, he spent time in social housing when he was growing up. He's the child of a single mother, and he's really gained a lot of sympathy from the electorate for those credentials. And at the party level, he's someone who's been deeply involved in the administration of the party for a long time. Now, his main contender, as you say, is Peter Dutton. He's the head of the Liberal Party, and the Liberal Party is usually governing in coalition with the National Party, another smaller party which represents the interests of those living in country areas, in rural areas in Australia. So they kind of have come under the umbrella of the LNP, the Liberal National Party. Peter Dutton, he's been in politics for roughly 20 years or so, and the party itself is centre-right. He himself is a lot further right, and he's kind of styling himself as a bit of a mini Trump. Like, he's trying to pull the party and its base further to the right, by apparently based on the kind of issues that he's championing. He's really made no secret of his conservative values, and the kind of issues that he says that he really cares about. For example, he wants to cut the number of public servants. He wants to really put a cap on immigration and migration numbers, and on various other, culture wars issues. There are smaller parties as well. There's the Greens Party, which picked up a lot of seats in the last election. And then there's another, a movement of independents. There's independents in their own right, and then those that come under the aegis of the so-called Teals. And they are usually people who are traditionally from the Liberal side of politics, centre-right, but they're really driven and motivated by concern over climate change. And they actually won a number of seats in the last election. In fact, they're credited with taking the election away from the then ruling Liberal Party. Chris.
Aarti, you mentioned particularly from Peter Dutton, you described him as sort of a mini Trump in some of his platforms. And we did get this announcement from Trump yesterday on tariffs for Australia as well, a 10% across the board tariff. How has that gone down in this race between the two? Is Peter Dutton imagining that is someone who can speak to Trump, get those tariffs down further? It is also, of course, something that impacts the economy greatly.
Look, you're absolutely right. It has dominated the headlines today. In Australia, there's a lot of concern about it. But as an election issue, I don't think it'll have that much impact. And the reason for that is Australia's in trade deficit to the US. It has roughly 50% of the trade outflows as inflows from the US. The main areas are pharmaceuticals and gold, but they've actually avoided the tariffs. Now, beef farmers are a bit worried. That's another major export as well. The problem is that we're bracing for further. We feel like this is just the tip of the iceberg, that there's going to be further tariffs. So there's a lot of concern about that. Now, Trump, as you say, Dutton has styled himself after Trump, but I'm starting to hear murmurings that might not play that well because of this issue, because he might be less likely to stand up, to really take a stand for Australia's interests against the hegemon. Australia has had this traditional, really strong security and military relationship with the US, which I think Australia is now starting to hedge against. But we'll see what happens.
Well, this is the question, isn't it? Because for a conservative, a more far-right conservative, as you describe, someone like Peter Dutton, he has to put Australia's interests first. And if we're talking about tariffs and some of these things the US is doing, that in theory would mean that he should be backing, say, Buy Australia. Is that the kind of rhetoric that will be coming out of Australia now too?
It's hard to say. It's really hard to say what kind of rhetoric will come up. But I think in the minds of Australian voters, the need for a leader who has the courage to stand up to the senior partner in the relationship and can really take on an issue like this in a very diplomatic way, still, playing by the rules, but doing it in a way that is squarely all about Australia's interests. That is what's key here. And, what I'm hearing is there are some question marks starting to emerge about whether Dutton can really do that or is positioned well to do that.
And are there some other domestic issues that concern the electorate? Obviously, the economy is top of mind for many, but what else are people talking about there?
Look, this is truly a single issue election. People are almost entirely concerned about the rise in the cost of living above everything else. Now, Australia is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Our GDP per capita is roughly 55,000 euros. I think we're ranked 13th in the world, but there's absolutely no doubt that the cost of living rises over recent years have really affected many, many Australians, quite deeply in some cases. So the issue that voters have strongly indicated that they care about most of all is cost of living. There are other issues too. Housing is closely related to the cost of living. And, it's house prices in Australia are pretty high compared to what we earn. The average cost of a house in Sydney is something like $1.6 million, just as an indication. And in particular, trying to find a rental in a place like Sydney is near impossible. It's really difficult. So, of course, migration has been blamed for that. But, in a lot of ways, migration does help stabilise the economy. So that's been a really, really tricky conundrum for leaders. And they both have very different approaches to that particular issue as well. But both parties, both sides of politics, are vowing that housing will get their attention in different ways. There are some smaller issues as well, but no, they're really the key two ones.
Aarti Betigeri, Monocle's Canberra correspondent, thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure we'll check in with you again nearer to the election. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You are back with The Briefing. I'm Chris Chermak, and we're going to head now to Paris, where Monocle's Paris bureau chief, Simon Bouvier, is attending the world's oldest art and design fair known as PAD Paris. And Simon, great to have you on the show from there. Set the scene for us, first of all. What is this fair about?
Bonjour, Chris. So this fair is all about unique design pieces. Monocle was at Maison et Objet earlier this year. That is very much like a commercial interior design fair where a lot of people who work in hospitality, big B2B event, go to kind of outfit their spaces. Here, it's all about galleries. You have 80-odd gallerists showing a variety of different pieces from sculptures, ceramics, and furniture, all interiors focused, but it's all gallerists and unique pieces here. And some of the gallerists who show here also show at the London edition, PAD London, and they say that the vibes at the Paris original are a lot more European. People are more contemplative. They want to chat to the gallerists less, and they're just taking in the art compared to the Anglo fair, where it's a kind of relentless flow of conversation and explaining all the artworks.
Simon, even if there is generally less chatter at the Paris fair compared to PAD London, I'm assuming it cannot escape the politics of the moment. How is Donald Trump's tariff announcement that we've been talking about a bit on this show already? How's that impacting the art market and conversations there?
Well, I think the different gallerists that I've been speaking to here, Chris, are not on the same page exactly about it. I think a number of them say it's unlikely to affect them that much because of the price point that they're selling at, and the fact that their clientele who is acquiring essentially unique artwork is not really scared of an extra 20% on the price tag of artwork that they've fallen in love with. But some disagreed and were concerned that they would have a lot more trouble moving the furniture that they had hoped to sell to American customers now that Liberation Day, as President Trump put it, is upon us.
Just finally, Simone, you've spoken to some Pad Paris first-timers, which of course is significant given this event is about the oldest design fair out there. How are they looking at what this design fair brings to the global design community?
Well, Chris, what I think is interesting is that historically Pad has been a place where gallerists who specialized in antique furniture really were the stars of the show. Now it has shifted significantly towards re-editions of furniture and even kind of brand new collaborations between gallerists and artists. I was speaking to Amélie Duchalat, who recently opened a gallery in New York and has been active in Paris for a while. It's her first time at PAD. And not only does she have a first-time space here, but she used it for a pretty unique scenography that is focused on opera and Wagner. It's centered on a Hoffman desk that's similar to the one that Wagner would have been seated at when he was writing the Valkyries. And she also has all of these different sculptures that represent these mythical warriors from Norse mythology. And there's sheet music scattered all over the floor of her space. So it's just kind of emblematic of this shift towards a more installation and art-focused fair, as opposed to a place where the greatest antique furniture dealers come to show their wares, which was the case at its beginnings.
Simone Bouvier, thank you very much for joining us. Monocle's Paris Bureau Chief. We'll let you get back to PAD Paris. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Now, Watches and Wonders is continuing in Geneva today, and Monocle's team has been at the fair perusing the exhibitions and the unveilings throughout this week. Sophie Grove, our Konfekt editor, has just returned from the salon, joins me right here in Midori House. Good afternoon, Sophie.
Good afternoon. I'm fresh from the airport.
Fresh from the plane. There isn't like a jet lag thing to deal with, but nonetheless, we do appreciate you coming in straight from the fair. What was it like?
Amazing. Well, it's such an incredible jamboree of different kind of international watch collectors, industry specialists, journalists. They have this amazing conference centre just on the outskirts of Geneva, and everyone that works there wears this sort of slightly Star Wars brown jumpsuit with shoulder pads, little bit crossover.
Does that fit into the watch design?
And they just look gorgeous. I actually want one of those jumpsuits. And then, so you go in, it's very beautifully carpeted white. Everyone's polishing and hoovering all the time that you're there. And there are 60 brands, and each one has a gorgeous booth that's a little bit sort of a reflection of their aesthetics. So actually Bouvier was there for the first time in the conference centre with this incredible marble-clad, sort of beautiful malachite greens everywhere booth. Chanel is sort of dark and moody with amazing lighting. So it goes on like that. And there's Bremont is very sort of militaristic with planes popping out of the side of the stall. So you get the picture.
It's always interesting how these kinds of fairs, no matter what they're about, in this case about watches, it is also about the presentation as you describe it. So it's sort of the unveilings that are happening there, and maybe you can tell us about some of those, the watches, but they clearly really put energy into the spaces too.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a real sense. I mean, the Van Cleef & Arpels booth was just beautiful, kind of sculpted out of sort of amazing Venetian glass. But there was this real sense of wonder because they have this planetarium which is made, it's clad in lapis lazuli. Then it has the kind of, the solar system with the sun in the middle and just beautiful gem-encrusted planets around. And people were kind of, just jostling to the front to see it when they wound it up. And it's very sort of almost Victorian feeling. And then it kind of unfurled and it was this sense of kind of spectacle, which I really loved, and everyone's, filming it. And then there was the real hot news is the colour blue, Chris, because Chanel's new J12 ceramic watch, which is a real classic. They have reinvented it in this amazing blue. It's a very Chanel sort of dark midnight blue, which is exciting for them. But then also Audemars Piguet's new watch was also blue, which is a blue that reflects the sky around Le Brassus and the Jura Mountains. And I saw another couple of blue. There was an amazing one at Zenith, and I saw another one at Hublot. So I think ceramics is a really interesting material. It's 7 times stronger than steel. And it really is, there's a lot of technical prowess happening at the store. So you really have to kind of know your tourbillons, know your perpetual calendars. You have to get into the kind of technicalities as well as some of the more splendid, beautiful gem-encrusted stuff.
Gem-encrusted stuff. Blue is clearly the theme then. What did you make of, I guess, the mix between Swiss and international brands? I'm always curious. The Swiss are sort of the ones that do dominate to some degree, historically, certainly the watch market. Were they out there in force, or was it this time more about some of the other brands?
No, definitely. I mean, it's interesting because the origins of watchmaking, real horology, high horology, go back to Geneva and also the Jura Mountains and the Vallée de Joux. So it's kind of really nice that it's there. But it's interesting that some of the Swiss really amazing maisons, like Audemars Piguet, they're not inside the centre itself. They do little pop-ups, little discreet parties. So then some of the very discreet watchmakers and independent watchmakers, you have to go into town to meet them in some of the hotels. So it's actually interesting to see who dominates these big spaces inside the centre. But Piaget is there. There's a real sense that, it's very Swiss. The way it's organised is incredibly timely, very elegant. But then it's interesting that you have the Bulgaris arriving. You have Chopard, absolutely gorgeous booth. So I think high jewellery is definitely inching into this sense of that they're also very much part of the watchmaking world as well.
And just finally, quickly, Sophie, for Konfekt, as you are, if you're putting your Konfekt hat on as the editor, how are you going to use this? How is Konfekt kind of looking at this fair?
Well, I think it's really interesting for us to look at where design is moving in terms of jewellery and watches. There's this wonderful piece I saw yesterday at Piaget and also Chanel, the swinging sautoir, which is a kind of watch around your neck on a necklace that you kind of, it's just these splendid, beautiful pieces. At Chanel, they had a few. One of them was actually disguised as a lipstick. But then...
So you move the top and then you can see the watch.
You do. And then, there are sort of lots of hidden watches as well. So I think we are looking for design inspiration. We're looking for also amazing creative directors to interview, CEOs. I spoke to Frédéric Grgić from Chanel, who's head of watches and jewellery. There's a real sense of interesting characters there and also just this wonderful sense of innovation.
Sophie Grove, editor of Monocle's sister publication, Konfekt. Thank you very much for joining us. This is The Briefing. This is The Briefing, and finally, we don't really need to introduce this item anymore, do we, Fernando Augusto Pacheco? It is the Global Countdown. We just heard the music. This is Monocle's senior correspondent. Good afternoon, Faye.
I love the music. Very much Miami Vice inspired, I have to say, Chris. Today we're going to Romania.
We are going to Romania. We were practicing our Romanian earlier. We're trying. We do have a Romanian colleague in Laura. She's been helping us with some of the pronunciations. So we're kind of just... she's prepped you for this, Faye.
She kind of prepped me, but I have to say, Laura, amazing teacher. But the language is difficult. I know Romanian is some sort of Latin language, of course, but it's very different. When you read it, it's very confusing. You don't pronounce things the way you might think. Nevertheless, Romania, I always thought of Romania as a land of fun pop. They had a lot of kind of Euro hits, classics in the noughties. So I decided to have a look what's going on in their charts now.
What was your impression? We're about to hear it. We'll start with number 5, I suppose, but general impressions?
It's all very dramatic, I have to say.
Dramatic, okay.
And number 5...
The theme is drama.
Always drama. And number 5, we have Tzanka Uraganu Costa Bijou, Mirage, Tsunami, and Susano with the song Salipt Ka Liptorea, which means it's stuck like a leech. Let's have a listen.
Some different influences there I wouldn't have necessarily expected. I don't know, like Middle Eastern, South Asian.
It's very mixed. And looking at the video, I think the main singer was singing in some sort of a football stadium, and then suddenly there's some ladies with fur coats walking around. I had absolutely no idea what the song was about. And then
leeches. It's about leeches.
But then I went to Google Translate, and I'm sure, sorry, Romanian listeners, one of the lyrics is naughty, naughty. I would give him a whip because he's a big rascal. So very, very interesting. I would love to find out a bit more about that.
Are we talking about male leeches, perhaps? Is that it? That's who we want to whip? Okay, something like that.
Something like that. It's a very colorful video, I have to say.
It is a colorful video. Okay, maybe some Romanian listeners can help us out with that one. What do we have at number 4?
Well, I did mention drama. I do think this song, it's not about cheating necessarily. It's about, I think, being in a relationship and thinking of someone else. You are with a woman or a man, but then you're actually thinking about someone else. So maybe you're not necessarily happy where you are.
Drama.
A lot of drama. And that was Dennis, Nuka and Lati with Doar Laia Balaia, which means only at her. Yes, at her. Let's have a listen.
Nu pot să aleg, nu pot să aleg, nu pot să aleg, una să fiu cu minte. Nu pot să aleg, nu pot să aleg, am una în inimă și alta minte. Sunt cu iubita și mă gândesc la iubit. Balaia, balaia, dimineața mă trezeam cu gândul doar la ea, cu gândul doar la ea, cu gândul doar la ea.
So the only at her is not the her he's with.
No, that's very sad. But one thing I got to tell you about Romanians, at least from the 5 songs they were listening and looking at their videos, I mean, there's no grey sweatpants there. Everybody's dressed to the nines, you know. There are a lot of kind
very
of
fancy.
It's a bit fancy, or you know, very much on your face. You know, there's a lot of kind of glitter, a little bit of glamour there, even when it's about cheating.
Even when it's about cheating, maybe he's looking at a particularly glamorous lady. Is that what's happening?
Perhaps.
That's it. Okay, well, we've got some drama there, a bit of cheating, thoughts of cheating. What do we have at number 3?
3, it feels to me very folksy, this one. I mean, of course, there's some traditional pop elements, but I think I did notice this about the Romanian chart. I think there's some Romanian folk there kind of mixed to the more kind of newer styles in the charts, and I think they do kind of a nice mixture. This is Lele and Narcisa with The Princess and the Fiddler. I'm not even trying to say this in Romanian. And yeah, and you know, I was talking about the clothing. This feels very traditional, the clothing. There's a kind of a rural setting there. I don't know if there's something to do with the princess and the fiddler, if it's based on perhaps a fable story or something like that.
A fable story from the Romanian heartland. It's nice to see that mix, as you say. We've got the elegance and the fur coats, and then we go to the Romanian rural society. Why not?
Exactly. We're going Wow. And number 2, it's super interesting, actually, because it's the soundtrack of a film. And the film is called Buzz House the Movie 2. And
it's the sequel.
It's the sequel. The first Buzz House was
big thing in Romania.
Big thing. The first Buzz House was the top Romanian title last year in the box office. It did very well. It's a mixture of comedy and horror.
So well, they got a sequel out within a year.
And the film is not even out yet, to be out on the 15th of April. So if you're in Romania, if you're curious, go to the cinema in Bucharest. But for now, you can dance to this tune, which is the main song from the soundtrack. It is by Rareș Bablusu, and it's Zanga Uraganu. He's back with Regele, which means king.
Una mia 100 lei, cumpăr 1000 de femei.
There's a very catchy, dancey
Very
style to
catchy.
that one. I'll give it that, absolutely.
And comedy horror is all the way in Romania.
Comedy horror. Did you see the music video to this one? It's just sort of do you want to watch this film?
I am curious. I do love horror. I mean, I couldn't quite understand the story. Apparently, in the sequel, there's this man. He wakes up from a coma in a Swiss kind of clinic. But then he basically can't lie anymore. He has to be honest all the time. That's part of the plot line. I don't know where the horror is coming from, but he's basically incapable of lying.
This is Jim Carrey coming back in a Romanian version from the 90s.
Very interesting. With some horror touch.
With some horror touch.
Don't forget the horror.
Gotta include the horror. I mean, we're talking Romania, Transylvania, all of that. So yes,
Good point.
Gotta have some horror. Okay, number 1. What is the most listened to track currently in Romania?
I generally think Macarena, the 90s classic, is underrated because I think it's a wonderful track. I still listen to it. I'm very pro Macarena. So I'm very glad to say that we have a Romanian rework of that iconic song from the 90s. I mean, it's a bit more contemporary, I think.
So you can still do the dance?
You can. Actually, you can.
Find out.
Absolutely. Let's have a listen to Bogdan DLP and the social media superstar Cristina Pusian with Macarena.
Judecăm. Ale, ale, pentru Macarena, toate fetele să își arate tonela. Hai, dă-mi și tu că e problema. Întoarce-te puțin și fă Macarena.
Finally, someone in the studio is doing the actual Macarena as opposed to just wiggling about over there. But yes, back from our producers in the booth there. What did you think of that, Faye?
I like it. As I said, I'm a big Macarena fan, and I think it does need new versions as well. Could it be a summer hit? Because this song has been released like only a few days ago and is already topping the charts in Romania.
Macarena for a new generation.
Macarena is back.
Macarena is back. Fernando Augusto Pacheco, thank you very much for joining us. That's all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Anita Riota. Our researcher was Francesca Jilks, and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Chermak. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.